back to Side Quests IX episode 9 now. Very special episode given the content and the subject matter. And back with me, my constant companion and perennial party member, Wes Schantz. Wes, how are you doing?
I'm good. I'm good. How are you?
I'm doing well. It's always funny to me to have a pre-show with you and immediately follow it with asking you how you're doing. I just caught up with you. So
Still good. Yeah, still good.
but maintaining our theme from night school, where I talk about generating FOMO in the listeners by mentioning that we have both a pre and a post show, and there's a lot that we talk about that's interesting that we don't include here, and we're constantly saying, I feel like I'm constantly saying, "Oh, I wish we were actually putting this in the show." But you have to get warmed up, and if you hit a couple good balls during the warm up, well, you hope you have some good ones during the match as well. But so this time is a special time, not only because we've reached the special number 9, so special in Dante literature. That's the age at which he was when he first met Beatrice. And Canto 9 tends to be transitional canto, followed by 10 in all three canticles, the Inferno, Purgatorio, and Paradiso, and often features something relative to Beatrice, like Purgatorio 29, very famously, Beatrice, the Italians would say. But also, this is the first time that I actually had to play again before
Yeah.
getting on the podcast. You really have been a champ the last couple weeks and have really been moving through the game. But I before we even summarize, and I feel so close to the game that I didn't feel the need to make voluminous notes this time. I have to mention that I think I have a hypothesis that this part of the game went for me the same way as the Labyrinth, the Brothers Labyrinth did for me, and probably the same for you because of how we play the games. What do I mean? I mean that I have a much more haphazard way of playing. I often access study guides after the fact, and I often access various scholarship or books on Final Fantasy IX after and podcasts as well, like Resonant Arc and Final Fantasy Union. After we've talked about something, I try and have sort of a raw experience. And when we that comes to a puzzle, and particularly a difficult puzzle, and particularly a puzzle that I left myself in the middle of 4 weeks ago, that makes something that I think could be smooth and fairly simple and straightforward, and just take a little bit of forethought, rather onerous. And so I spent quite a bit of time in the Gargan Rue underneath the marsh, making it to the outer continent. And I wanted to ask you whether you just moved right through that. That also reminds me of the sewers in Final Fantasy VIII before during the parade as well.
Oh, yeah, yeah, yeah. Yeah, no, I move through pretty efficiently, I've got to say. I try to make my time count when I sit down to play. So I look at things ahead of time and kind of get a feel for what's coming up and try to like accomplish enough that I feel like, oh yeah, I'm doing well at this game or whatever. But not everything by any stretch. Like this part, I think there's some prizes that you can win in the Chocobo minigame, and that's so tedious. I played it for like 5 or 6 tries, which is like, I don't know, 20 minutes or something, and I was like, okay, this is dumb. I'm done. Gonna move on through the maze. Yep, did the maze. The boss battle there was not the worst as far as like stealing items. I always try to steal the good items, but only like for a few turns and then I give up. But this time I got the item that I wanted from the boss, so that was cool. And
The
then
the
huh?
was that's at the beginning of the segment, right?
Yeah, that's the weird thing about this dungeon is that there's no boss at the end. Instead, there's two bosses at the beginning. It's like a kind of a gimmick boss that chases you down the corridor, right? And you can't win that fight. You can only like sort of stun it and then keep running or just run away, which is what I did. And then it falls down in the hole, right? And then the one of the two bounty hunters comes out, the female assassin Lonnie, right? The others, we don't have his name yet. I know he becomes a playable character, and honestly, I don't remember his name. So I
Amar,
feel that's
the
Amarant.
to
Yeah.
buy some $5,000 poison knuckles, suggesting his. Also, we got to see a thief with purple hair and a bow. So we're
Uh-huh.
getting some references to potential players at the.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, Lonnie, she kind of looks like she could be a playable character. She's like the right size with respect to our cast of characters, kind of like Beatrix, and she seems to have some kind of story going on. Like her way of speaking is pretty rough. She curses a lot. She's like,
Uh,
um, even to Braun, she's like pretty rude, so she's got like a little bit of spunk to her, and she's got the giant axe, which is, pretty cool. I I think that her approach in the battle too, like some of the other gimmicky battles, is that she'll only attack, I think just Garnet until either someone else maybe can attract her attention. I think she eventually attacked Vivi on my playthrough here, but yeah, it's a weird battle in that way. It's like she doesn't care about you know just taking the pendant, but about actually annihilating Garnet herself, which I thought was sort of the opposite of what she was saying, like in the lead into the fight, right? It's like, give up the pendant or yeah, I don't know. So she seems to have a lot of um, vindictiveness, rage. Something's going on with her, and and it doesn't seem like she's working too closely with the other assassin, with Amarant, because he's not there. So like when they appear, it's like they're sort of a team, but then it seems clear that they've actually separated out. And yeah, um, her her departure from the fight is, kind of abrupt as well. She just like walks out back towards the mist continent, and that leaves you to sort of, yeah, explore this maze, which is, it's, yeah, a little bit confusing. The 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 mechanic there is that you turn the switches to change the direction that the water is flowing, and whichever way the water's falling, the Gargant will go the other one. And so you kind of have to, retrace your steps a bit, loop around, fight various little monsters and things, and discover the. Did you find the Moogle hidden in the wall?
I found a difficult to see Moogle and
Okay.
say within near where the treasure hunter was, the first treasure hunter, and that.
Okay.
But
Yeah.
there's a lot that I didn't find. I think.
There's a wall that's like made of rubble, and you can borrow the pickaxe from the one treasure hunter. And if you hit that wall enough times, it'll start to talk, and it'll say Kupo. And so you just keep hitting it. Eventually, the Moogle falls out. Um, yeah, I don't know. It's like there's, I think the indication that the um, the Moogle network is quite extensive at this point, right? It is beyond the known world, and their their behavior is increasingly like um, whimsical, I guess. I don't know. Like um, they don't seem to have any concerns with fighting back or overcoming enemies. They just hang out. They just go on their little adventures. We see Stiltskin again selling a random assortment of items, and that's his way of continuing his journey. And some of the letters that they send back and forth are about like, who they've seen, what's going on. Um, but they apparently don't have any um, like they don't have any allegiance or alliances or anything like that. Um, so that's the thing that I was kind of noticing as we're thinking about the different parts of this world. This map that we get, it it has a bunch of continents, and we're on what, disc 2 of 4, so it makes sense that we're onto the second continent finally. But there's there's a note on the map too from Fratley, if you look at it in the items, it says something about like using fear to propel you forward, which I found really interesting. Um, and that does seem to be like the main motivator for a lot of the activities that the Mughals undertake. Um, they are not, yeah, they're not fighting back. They're not defending themselves. They're just, you know, extending, expanding. And so there's these treasure hunters that, have gone only so far, but not progressed beyond the cave because it's kind of a one-way exit. Like once you ride that last bit of the Gargant, um, I think they're like actually the roots of the tree, right? That they're climbing along. Uh, there is no switch to turn it around and go back, right? And so it seems like the treasure hunters sort of know about this, but they're content to stay where they are. Whereas your party, you take that leap, you go, go out, and Zidane says, there's this crazy quality to the light he's never seen before because there's no mist on this continent. So that seems to be the theme of this place is like unsullied nature, and we get that in a few different ways with the two villages here. Um,
Right. And so, yeah, so no mist. You see these treasure hunters, and again, ride on these ancient gargants, which seem to be riding along similarly ancient roots that of
mhm.
giant size. There's this prehistoric sort of
Yeah.
monumentalness. It's funny that whether you take like evolutionary biology or mythology, if you go far back, you find big creatures, right? Like, so, 65 million years, you find like brontosauruses and things like that. Brontosauri, of course, with good Latin. Or you go back before the time of even the Olympian gods and you find the Titans.
Uh-huh.
Uh, and again, just bring up Dante, the giants are in the middle of the earth and are giant in the Inferno, and they are right there at Circle 8, and they help against their will the pilgrim to get to Circle 9. But then even larger than they are is Lucifer down at the bottom. So you get this notion that the farther down into the depths of things you get, the closer you get to things of titanic size, these sort of primordial things that have a scope beyond what you can imagine. And then again, you get the sort of same experience when you start to go to outer space. Again,
Mm.
whether it be physical outer space or sort of philosophical Dante outer space, where things get farther and farther and faster away. And of course, we know from actual cosmology at this point, Lobachevsky and all of that, just the type, yeah, just the magnitude of outer space has required uh, uh, what like many development of numbers with many more zeros than I could possibly imagine in order to conceptualize at this point. Like I think the highest number I know by name is like Vingentillion, which is something way beyond trillion. But all that goes to say is that if this, in the same way as I would say Final Fantasy 7, 8, and 8 did, we started with a much more limited scope and understanding of the world than we now have, even though we don't have a good one yet. We've flown through the skies. We've now gone through caverns with primordial ants that ride along giant primordial trees. At the very least, as we're moving through, and this is a funny thing about being at this point in the game, our understanding of the nature of the world and ourselves is transforming. And we talked a little bit about this on the pre-show, but I said that I used to be held up by the fact that I wanted to be able to see myself in the act of transforming. And like being able to catch myself falling asleep. And during the pre-show, I said that I thought that was a contradiction in terms, a contradictio in adjecto, sort of, and that I thought that Adam and the biblical story of Adam and Eve had to be put to sleep when Eve was created from his rib, because I thought that was supposed to represent something like a transformation, and that transformation is by nature invisible and something that one can't simply perceive by means of one's senses. And so our characters have grown a lot but we
Mhm.
are not yet at a stopping point. We're still moving forward. And I think when we do get to one of those moments of reflection, sort of like when Final Fantasy VII, all the characters got to stand in a circle together before we went to like the ancient city. Um, we'll realize that actually we've gotten pretty deep into this game, that we know a lot more than we thought or than we did in the beginning, and that in fact our characters have I made the point with Squall. He goes from mercenary to hero of light, even though he was sort of that the entire time by fate. Sure. Um, but I think we'll find that Zidane, who was actually made into an elite guardsman for Garnett this
Uh-huh.
time, has become much more, and his scope and his role in the socio-political battles in the world, and then eventually even the cosmological battle for the world, has shifted. Though perhaps it is the same as it always was supposed to be, given his unknown nature and his strange tale.
The I think the suggestion here is that like we are very strange looking to these people, which
Yes,
is fair.
that's the dwarves.
Yeah, they um and yet like surprisingly enough, they are not too put off by Vivi because they recognize him as one of a class of beings that trades with them. They mistake him for one of them. And so this leads to a kind of comedy of errors where you know, Zidane is asking about Kuja, and they're like, "Well, you look pretty suspicious." And so it just like plants a seed that, well, they're actually quite similar. This will be developed further. And then on the other hand, like Vivi is like basically not even paid attention to as he's walking around, which is
For
totally weird for
once,
him.
usually the black mages are recognized as bronze henchmen who have killed the townspeople, and he's having to answer for that. But in this case, in Conde Petit, it's the person who's subject to prejudice is our Quina is the
Oh,
one
that's true.
who's
That's right.
being the thief. And but Vivi is, just some pinty hat.
Yes. Yeah, the various little like scenes that we get here, um so they're trying to marry off Dagger to one of the dwarf kids. Yeah, Vivi is like just completely ignored, uh, and they think he's one of the pointy hats. Um, Kina, they think might be the thief, right? Apparently, someone's been stealing food, and they are really interested in food, and so uh, they chase her away. Um, and then, as we're finally kind of reuniting everybody, one of the black mages shows up, right, and is trading at the market there. Um, so yeah, the kind of lifestyle that we see here again is like they are wary of strangers, but they are not, um, you know, forcibly keeping us out. Like far from it, we can see a lot of what's here, um, but they are familiar with and trade with the black mages, and so there's a kind of like topsy-turviness to this place. It's also weird. I mean, like the dwarves, per their roots in Tolkien, they're traditionally sort of like underground guys, but this time they're on this, you know, this kind of temple structure that straddles the roots that cross this chasm or canyon, and they seem really interested in all aspects of nature, in the light, in the mountains, in the trees. They're in some sort of harmony with all of them, and they are particularly interested in this idea of a sanctuary, which apparently has to do with their um, marriage ritual or something. Like once you get married, you go and you kind of inscribe your names on the sanctuary or something. And so that, for whatever reason, sort of captivates Garnet's attention. And then meanwhile, yeah, Zidane, he's trying to be a good, you know, forward thrust of the plot for a change, but they pretty quickly get sidetracked here to figure out what's going on with the pinty hats down in their uh, southeastern forest. I think they say a few times it's where it's so deep in the forest that even the owls don't go there. And so
which
that's
is
our next destination.
you have to get in there, and the enemy that's right at the beginning of the forest too, those large owls that we but yes, no, so I'm just looking back at my few visual notes here. And yes, the doors are quite interesting. They're on this sort of aerial bridge, so they seem much more like an aerial or limbic creature than a creature of the mines. J.R.R. Tolkien in his letters wrote that he actually based the dwarves off of the Jewish people, and especially their affinity for jewels, which is something that Jewish people were very good at working with jewels and stones in the Middle Ages, which is why their names often have like jewels, like gold in them, or like Goldberg or something like that. Would be like, like a gold mountain.
Mhm.
And so that's that's a vestige of the sort of class and labor that they did at the time. And J.R.R. Tolkien said this quite fondly. He said, I wish I were Jewish in this letter, but he's like, but I'm a Catholic, which is his other chosen religion. Very interesting part of that group of people. But these dwarves do not they're and this is one of the interesting things about their reception not coming straight from like say Western and Near Eastern roots, but from a Japanese perception of these. And so
Yeah.
these dwarves are green. They are on this outer continent, so they are an outsider in a way, like the dwarves of Tolkien, but not they're not in the passageway like these treasure hunters, which seem more like the Tolkien sort of dwarves. But these are sort of nature dwarves. They're kind of like elves
Yeah.
in this way. But they're also they're and this is something that is I think very clear in Final Fantasy VII and also 9. Their linguistic indicators also give us a lens through which to view them. So just like Barrett and Cid swore a lot in Final Fantasy VII and sort of showed that they were salt of the earth people, even though I guess Cid was sort of a rocket scientist. Um, uh, so do we get Dagger being educated on how to speak less formally earlier, and there are differences in people's speech that are supposed to indicate. Freya has this formalized way of speaking that's very knightly. That are is supposed to code these characters in some way, and so these characters explicitly speak like Scotsmen. They have a Scottish accent, and in fact, they use a verb that immediately indicates them as Scots people, which is "I ken," which is the first person singular indicative present indicative active of "I know"
Mhm.
in in Scottish dialect. But like I've got a bit here. If ye deny say rally ho, then ye cannae enter Conde Petie, hain tune o' the doors. And so it's interesting because we often see, and say Star Wars, for example, from which Final Fantasy and Final Fantasy IX explicitly takes material, they code often elite evils as English. The Empire officers have English accents, with Darth Vader being different. He has an American accent, but he's special. Here, though, however, getting a Scottish accent indicates to me something different. It doesn't indicate to me like elite bad guy so much as these are a funny, interesting, salt of the earth, perhaps undeveloped people is what they were going for
Mhm.
in this, and that they are somehow closer to nature and the ritual of nature. That was something I was paying attention to this time because of what you brought up in Resonant Arc, the necessity of rituals here, and also, of course, given the failed ritual that we recently saw in Clara that resulted in disaster.
Mhm.
And so here we have marriage rituals brought up. If it were Final Fantasy VIII, I would say that we're a little too on the nose. Well, Final Fantasy IX, uh, we've seen that it's a little more complicated as well because Dagger, what is it that she said to Zidane right as they entered? She said, "Well, aren't you always thinking about girls?" And he's like, "Yeah, yeah, I'm always thinking about you." Uh, Yeah, it
soaking
was
head.
cold. It was cold. So yeah, he's not. It's not so obvious that they're going to be successful as it was with, say, Renoa, who tried very, very hard to bring Squall out of his shell, as well as everybody else in that cast. But I just wanted I digress. I wanted to mention the Ling. It was interesting and I think unique for a Scottish accent to be included, and for it to be included with these dwarves that are coded, I think, very differently from a Tolkien dwarf, and that might have some culture because of the cultural difference of the people creating the dwarves.
Mhm. That makes sense. I mean, they're even in earlier games, they're more kind of in a traditional dwarfish mode of being like deep in the ground. Like I'm thinking of FF4, where they also say "lally ho," which is like a translation of "rally ho," their catchphrase. Um, whereas here, yeah, uh, they're associated, I think, also with elemental crystals, and so the the idea that there's like crystals out there that Braun is trying to get, it might seem like these ones would have something like that, but it appears that there's only the three, right? They're the each held by one of the powers on the Mist Continent, right? The Falcon's Claw, Garnet's actual pendant, and then the jewel from the harp, right, in Clara. So maybe there's more out there in the world, but to appearances, the dwarves don't have anything that precious. Uh, they, they are, I think, then immediately kind of uh, contrasted with or compared with the Black Mage Village as well, right? Like this idea again that there's a kind of illusion that masks it, that we see uh, the one that we're kind of following through the woods. He lifts the illusion and then passes through, and then it comes back down again. It makes the forest appear to be dead and barren, where actually it's full of life. And the like path to their home is also apparently enchanted, right? Because it's a single screen, and in a way, this is almost more confusing than the whole Gargan Rue maze, because rather than having to do a lot of manipulating and moving around and stuff, all you have to do is not trust your eyes. You just have to uh, each time you leave the screen and come back in, the configuration of exits has moved around potentially. You have to just check the sign and then go on the path where it says the owls are not. Um, so it's a pretty short, dungeon, if you even want to call it that. It's almost like you have two village type places to explore back to back, aside from yeah the overworld that's between them. And there's another marsh here, so you can catch some frogs there. Uh, there's some chocobo tracks, so you can call the chocobo and dig up any chocographs that you might have found. But I mean, yeah, it's a little bit odd the pacing of this part of the game. Yeah, so there's that one boss battle, and Zidane, of course, seems like he's trying to flirt with Lonnie as she's trying to kill them. So that's, I think, what specifically Garnet is mad about in that moment, because that sort of just happened in the course of their journey together. Um, but instead, there's basically just a lot of, story and character development here, and it's really, I think, a lot like what we saw with Garnet last time. Her interpretation of the story that Rama is telling as a kind of test for her, we see something really similar here where both Vivi and Zidane have pretty significant um, kind of pieces of their character arcs that get introduced in the Black Mage Village. And they happen kind of in tandem, which is interesting. Um, yeah, so again, once you get there, they all split up, they all go their separate ways to explore the village. Quina goes and tries to eat the chocobo egg, which is just awful. I mean, really fell in my estimation in that moment. Uh, whereas, Dagger is kind of talking to the mages in the shops and things. Um, and Vivi goes and finds his way to the cemetery. Uh, and so they kind of are gradually realizing, like, I think mostly from Vivi's ATE sequence there, that these mages are like him, or he is like them. They have kind of awoken. They're able to see this in him, and they fear the humans, but they trust him because he's like them. Uh, and it's upsetting to him because they kind of divulge that their lifespan, or you know, their existence is very brief. And many of the mages, not violently, but just because they've kind of run down, have stopped moving, right, or died. And so in the cemetery, they kind of explain this to him. Um, and he runs off. It's another, few scenes in which his friends are trying to comfort him or help him, but ultimately they just kind of let him have his time, and he goes out of the inn during the night to process this. And that's interspersed with this story that Zidane starts to tell about himself. He tells it in the third person, but it becomes clear, especially with the visuals that accompany it, that he's talking about himself. Um, and the key kind of refrain of these two stories is this place to call home, right? This search for home. Um, so yeah, I think there's a lot to kind of analyze about the stories themselves, and then the way that they're kind of layered onto each other there.
Yeah, well, so we're starting to get some doubling action going on really seriously, right? In the same way that we had a sort of petrified forest early on in the game, now we have what's described as a dying forest, and in fact looks like a dead forest with the Estar-like illusion, which makes me think that this place is similar to Clara, trying to keep people out through some sort of magic in
Mhm.
some way or another. We have the second coup's marsh, where somehow the coup that is in the first marsh is now here too, and
Right.
comes and tells us that we're doing a good job. And now we find our second village where there are black mages. The first one was the one in which they were being produced, where they were unconscious,
Mhm.
unaware. But here, like you said, we Vivius seemed to be okay because they say, look at his eyes. It's like the Mako eyes. Look at his eyes. He must have been in
Mhm.
Soldier in Final Fantasy VII. But you can see, like Pythagoras could see understanding in his student's eyes, supposedly according to Diogenes Laertes, you can see awareness
Mhm.
in Vivi's eyes. So there's a difference in understanding. So I mean, there's a very deep, sophisticated concept. One of the fundamental concepts I think that we investigate on this show, which is the coming to be of consciousness and the transformation of consciousness. But there is something immediately recognizable about Vivi that makes him recognizable to them, to those who are also these sort of mathematicoi or elect black mages that have attained consciousness, that he is not just one of the run-of-the-mill violent death machines.
Mhm.
Um, but so okay, so we get our second marsh, we get our second city, we get we're we get our second forest locale, which is even and we'll soon get our second desert locale too, juxtaposed to Clara. So there's an interesting doubling going on here. But I wanted to pick up on what you said about the cemetery. Vivi finds the cemetery. Very ironic given his name. I've lived to find the death place, but how death is described is interesting. Like you said, Vivi's like, what happened? Was he hit? Did he get hurt? What do you mean he stopped moving? Why did you bury him under? Why did you put him under the ground because he stopped moving?
Mhm.
Parsing out these rituals. And so we've just had marriage focused on. And Dagger saying, I'm not getting married. But now we have death, burial. These are the two fundamental, in a way, rituals, right? The uh the solidifying of like being together for life and the death ritual. You might say like the birth ritual is all and rituals associated with that are also pretty fundamental. Um, but Vivi doesn't understand the concept of death. He's still a very young person. He says, Well, and neither do these other black mages, right? Because one says, "Well, I assume he's coming back at some point," which is no denigration to the Christian faith or the Hindu or Buddhist faiths and the ideas of reincarnation or resurrection. Perhaps those are true, but they're not coming. The black mage is not coming at this from a dogmatic perspective. They're coming at it from a hypothetical perspective because they don't understand the nature of their existences. They don't know where they came from. They don't have anybody to guide them, nor have they yet developed a religion. They have the vestiges of it. They buried. They left signs of the people, the entities that have stopped moving, that have lost the vigor of their knees, as Homer would say. Um, and that have been unstrung is another way he would put it.
Mhm.
And but they're trying to deal with this with a nascent society that also is closed off from the rest of the world. So except for these other interesting dwarves who are themselves sort of exiled from the rest of the world.
Mhm.
And so there's just not a lot of the Black Mages seem to be doing a lot of it on their own. I think there will be some cultural osmosis with the dwarves and possibly some sort of marriage rituals will make their way to them. But it is interesting to see them just anthropologically in in a community trying to make this community work without understanding fundamental concepts about their own existences, like what the nature of death is and like how whether death is permanent or
Mhm.
not.
Mhm.
Um, which is perhaps something that we're dealing with. And also we've got these Phoenix Downs, but then sometimes characters disappear, like Aerie. And the Phoenix Down doesn't work anymore. And right, and General Leo from Final Fantasy VI.
Mhm.
And so right. So in some ways I think the black mages themselves sort of young in their consciousness, like we would have been when we first played the game at 15 or so, um, are representing sort of a secular age, trying to struggle with these concepts that are really, really, really difficult to understand.
Well, yeah, I mean, I'm thinking about what you said about sort of observing the transformation. And if it's true that there's something sort of paradoxical about seeing one's own transformations in the process of them happening, that's sort of collapsing, too much inward. There's a kind of alternative whereby you observe the transformation of a character, right? Or the myth that encapsulates that ritual that may have existed in a society or may need to be recreated for a society to stay viable. And and I think that it's fair to say that each of these characters is in some sort of process of transformation. I think, with Vivi, it is a a I don't know, like a heightening of his coming to consciousness, right? He's already conscious, he's aware, and yet this idea of mortality raises that another level almost.
Yes.
And I think the juxtaposition of the marriage ritual with the cemetery um, is then pushed a little bit further here with Zidane as he's kind of laying down to sleep and telling this story. It's about him searching for his origin, right? Essentially, where does he come from? His birthplace, and all he can remember is this kind of blue light that he mentions. Um, the scene that goes with that is the scene from that part of Lindblom that has no story purpose up to this point, that harbor area, which is so evocative and has the kind of light coming through the dark clouds, almost like the opening of FF6, Um, it it's the place along which our memory Zidane is sort of running around, and it's like representing his search. He goes off on a journey. He comes back without success. He gets a beating from Baku back in their clockwork hideout, place, and he he struggles to kind of wrap his head around the idea of what this means for his home. Um, is it that Baku and that family is his home, right? Well, he seems to have rejected that. He seems to have made a bid for, again, searching for the original or perhaps trying to create a replacement or something like that. And it then turns to Vivi, like Zidane seems to understand that for Vivi, the alternatives are also there. Like, is it a place? Is it this village? Or is it a kind of journey that he's on to find a uh, a family more so than an actual like locale, and and that seems to be uh, the choice that Vivi makes, right? Is that his his friends and the party are more important to him than just being safe and among the black mages, and partly that seems to be due to questions that he's been asking all along about what it means for him to be human, right? He's going to experience that um, much more by going off and staying with them rather than um, by departing from the adventure at this point. So I think the storytelling process here uh, is not um, it's not solely for the purpose of Zidane to understand himself, right? Um, there's a kind of block there or something that he can't get through. Um, he's telling the story to, I guess, understand a bit better what's going on with Vivi, right? So there's a kind of interesting triangulation that's happening there. Um, I'm noticing that this is also the point at which, if Zidane was the winner of the Hunter festival, this is when he'll Garnet to go on the date with him, and she basically will reject it out of hand. So you get this scene either way. It's not dependent on that, um, but it's not primarily romantic either, right? It's like if it is, it's in a very subtle way of him sort of opening up to her, but it's mostly about him like trying to show that he understands what Vivi might be going through.
Which again is has that double irony of the fact that he continues to try and play this big brother role as if he is in more in the know than
Yeah.
and continues to be like, well, life is tough, and maybe you should just pursue girls, and yeah, learning the nature of yourself and the fact that you have limited time, a much more limited scope to your mortality than you thought is tough. It's like, well, just wait, Zidane. Don't worry, you'll you may be saying these things to him thinking that you're standing aside from this advice, but it will soon apply to him as well. I'm not mentioning as much about that because I didn't quite make it to that point. I made it to the cemetery, and then
Oh, okay.
I just, I'm looking forward to having this moment like Cloud at Calm or something
Hmm.
like
Hmm.
that. But something I wanted to mention about the cemetery scene is Black Mage number 56 has just described his old friend 36 and how they helped each other a lot. Um, but he says he's going to come out again one day, right? This is the resurrection I mentioned, but he
Yeah.
also another interesting sacrament. When he does, I'm going to wash him off in the pond, which is interesting because he's lighted on not only the notion of a resurrection, but also of baptism.
Hmm.
And you see this right at the beginning of Purgatory, and Dante's Purgatorio, where Cato the Elder, who would have been consigned to hell by Augustine in his City of God, is for some reason one of the elect for Dante, and he says, "Go wash your face off," and so Dante has to anoint himself with water. and clean himself up before he goes to this holy land. Very baptismal. He does it at the top of purgatory as well, and the two rivers, Lethe and Unoe. Unoe is created by Dante, but here too, there's this notion that once you come out of the ground, you're dirty. Well, you need to wash yourself off, sort of like Odysseus in front of Nausicaa. He's dirty at first, and then he washes himself off, and then he's purified. It's like he's transformed into something new. You can understand why baptism would use water, because water cleanses in the same way that, or well, not in the same way, in a different way from how fire can also cleanse.
Mm.
But both are used for cleansing imagery. Um, for their respective uses. Purgatory, fire, like a pyre. It comes from the root puros in Greek, which is where we get the word pyre and fire from. But again, we were talking about sort of the secular age and this nascent culture, and funny that, well, when he's resurrected, he'll need to be bathed because he'll be covered in dirt. And yet it's a different sort of rationale from, say, the sacred rationale, which is supposed to be itself an analogy for the transformation that is perhaps actually occurring due to the ritual for holy or mysterious reasons. But here too, we have sort of a anima naturaliter Christiana. And it doesn't have to be Christian, but it's just interesting that that both the death and the resurrection and a form of baptism and cleansing would all be connected together in
Yeah.
this sort of natively in Black Mage number 56's mind.
Well, yeah. I mean, the image that the blue light conjures up for Zidane that he sort of associates it with is the ocean, right? So there is some kind of, watery journey thing that's being aligned there with birth and with death on the other hand. Um, the way that Vivi came to consciousness remains a mystery, and the reason that he's different in appearance from the others is not resolved here either. They don't know these things, but they ask Zidane like, "Hey, do you remember when you were born?"
Mm.
Right? So they sort of put it back to him in that exact same way of like, um, we don't know why we were given this gift of consciousness, how this transformation happened, but now that we are, we're going to, do our best by one another. They seem to have a fairly idyllic little village here, and it has to do with their ability to remain separate from the rest of their unawakened brethren, right? They're not on a mission to go out and, proselytize. Far from it. They just want to escape. They want to hide. Um, the one who does seem to sort of remember when he woke up, he says it was in the context of a war, right? He woke up with the blood and the dead bodies around him, and he was so scared that, per Fratley's words on the map, right? Like that fear propelled him. He ran, and he eventually found this place. So there seems to be a a really high value placed on nonviolence, on sort of communication, and being okay with not fully understanding, right? Not fully delving into the reasons for things. They even are okay with your party leaving once you know the location of their hiding place. They don't try to stop you from going. They are okay with Vivi leaving, and they say something about how they want him to come back and tell stories. So there's again this idea like there's um, there's multiple possible ways to imagine these characters living, of course. Now, in the context of our playthrough, we're very much on pretty much a one track. But the other, I think, funny bit of dialogue here is when they're sort of on their way out of the village. Each of the characters has had this kind of profound moment of growth and transformation, and then Queena shows up and is like, "Hey, you can't just like leave me, I won't have anything to eat. I'm gonna starve." As Zidane just says, "Oh yeah, I forgot about you." Dot 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 dot. That's it.
Oh yeah, I forgot about
So that's Queena.
that's
Uh,
Queen. Yeah, well, the most physical transformer, right? Always absorbing food and also magic of sorts into themselves. I got Holy 4, a level 4 Holy for Queen,
Yes.
which I'm pretty stoked about having done because I didn't look that up prior. And so when I saw that that was what that particular meal, that monster meal would do for me, I was, well, like I said, stoked.
Yeah. Yeah, Queen is an amazing character. They're so necessary to have as comic relief, and also just yeah, their mechanics are interesting. You know, they add a lot to what otherwise is a pretty static party for a while now, right? We
Yes.
haven't found another party member in quite a while, and we don't know what's going on with our other half of the party. We have no way to transmit messages because apparently Muggles only carry letters for each other.
Yeah, we need a party net or something like that. And right, you did you know Queen? This is just very random factoid. Does a random amount of damage. Uh,
I read that. Yeah,
and
yeah.
I was noticing that because I was varying. My characters are between levels 17 and 20 right now, but Queen
Mhm.
will sometimes do like 200 damage, sometimes 700, and so and has a pretty good fork, spork or whatever it is at this point. So yeah, well. That's just
Dude,
toyed
you
in.
can you can find cactuars,
Oh,
and they will teach you the thousand needles, which is pretty amazing. Uh, the okay, there's also in that same scene where you are on the bunk beds and Zidane's telling his story. That's also where the Virgo Stelazio coin is hidden. So for some reason, um,
in a bedroom. That's
yeah, it's among the bed things. And watching the sunset from the Cape, Virgo whispered, "My only wish is to be with you now." Dot dot dot. And so she's the one that all of the other, zodiac signs have been searching for. She's speaking to somebody, and it's in red, which is kind of interesting. But I think we've only found about half of the coins, so it was surprising to me that we find the Virgo coin point and not at the end of that quest. So
and yeah, and you found that poor Moogle that I didn't. And it's interesting to see how marriage rituals are stacking up at this point, because of course we saw the Moogles who had to ring the marriage bell in Gizmaluke's grotto, right?
right, right,
Wanted to break out of it for a Kupo nut. Interesting sexuality and gluttonous nature are adjacent sins in the Middle Ages, and sometimes one is the first, and sometimes the other is the first, and so they go together. Not only do they use similar organs to manifest often, but so do they go together in medieval handbooks of sins as well as Dante's Inferno. And so yeah, so we've seen a couple representations of marriage, and again, interesting given the age of the people playing this, but then like you said, these memento mori or these
mhm,
mementi mori that yes, it is. That is a big deal, and that might be coming up. But then there are these other sacraments as well, or these other major moments of existence that come up that tend to be that are ritualized by
yeah,
peoples, and so keep those in mind too. And I think the Final Fantasies do a good job of giving us not only reason to look forward to the future as young people playing the game, or when we were younger, but then also keep the facts of life, as it were, in front of us.
mhm,
That even if the greatest joys of life are still coming, so is the end of life, and for certain characters sooner than others.
mhm, yeah.
So I guess we should enjoy it and make the most of it.
Yeah, I mean the kind of cosmic way that happens in all the games, right? The world itself is under threat of some kind of
Mm.
terrible destruction, but maybe that can lead to transformation of some kind. Um, and then I think on the meta level, like we keep sort of noticing, like these characters themselves have a very circumscribed existence, which we can only sort of fill out imaginatively because of the state of these games as they stand. Now, one can imagine, an RPG Maker type game in
Mm.
which you get to go in and tinker and mod and do, other storylines, other branching adventures, other stages of life being represented by the game. Um, and I think that's kind of what Clair Obscura is about, right? It's about like different ages that get axed every year or something, right? So it's clearly like picking up on that because it's been trained, right? Those people who made that game were trained by playing these old Final Fantasy games growing up. So,
And
so
they
yeah, it's interesting to see that transmission of that idea.
Yes, and they recently won all 7 golden joysticks for which they were nominated, including Game of the Year.
Uh-huh.
And so, particularly given their name, Clair Obscur 33,
Yes.
clear reference to Dante,
Yes.
and his 33 cantos per canticle for all 3 canticles, plus 1 introductory one in the Inferno. And so yeah, gotta get that, and I hope it comes out on Switch too, so that we can do that together because we have a lot of projects coming up.
I know.
And yeah, regardless of the order, irrespective of the order we go in, we have a lot to do,
Hmm.
and more and more because apparently masterpieces like Clair Obscur. I mean, it's being described again like how Final Fantasy VII was described as a masterpiece work of art beyond genre. And when we hear these claims, what can we do but investigate them?
It's time. It's time very soon.
Yes. All right. Well,
First, we got to finish this up.
yes. First, we got to yeah. First things first. First things first, of course. All right, my friend. Well, it's good to be playing this again, and I feel a lot more connected, and that was something I was missing. And well, I'm looking forward to continuing this next week.
Sounds good.
All
Take
right.
care.
Oh yeah, and happy Thanksgiving.
Yes. You too. Happy Thanksgiving.